Zuck, leave her alone. Franklin shouted, dropping Bishop's shovel into the spring and lifting both empty hands toward 10 mounted men. The pregnant woman beside him tightened her grip on the bar of a loaded handcart. One palm guarded the child beneath her dress, while dust rolled over the 3 stones Franklin had pried from the bank. Without looking at him, she said, "Put those stones back, Mr. Larkin, or by tomorrow, Bishop will own every drop." Franklin stared at the dark hollows the stones had left in the mud. He had spent the morning clearing what he thought was a wagon approach, working down the debt he owed Percival Bishop for winter feed. Now the cattleman's riders were spreading along the ridge, and a widow with flour jars and a folded canvas tent on her cart was telling Franklin he had nearly handed them her spring. Bishop reined in his roan. His men rested easy in their saddles, easy enough to make the guns at their hips feel less like tools and more like promises. Larkin, Bishop called. "I pay you to clear that bank. I do not pay you to entertain squatters on Bishop Water." Franklin kept his hands raised. "She is drawing a bucket. She is a confused widow who cannot mind her own borders." Bishop nodded toward the torn bank. "Step aside. We will widen the trench ourselves." A fight rose in Franklin as naturally as breath. Then the widow spoke before he could turn himself into the hero of trouble he had helped cause. "The large gray stone," she said. 2 feet left. Set it where the mud is darker." Franklin lowered his hands. He moved sideways, putting his body across the narrow trail without blocking her view, and bent for the water-slick stone. "Larkin." Bishop's voice cracked over the spring. "Set that back and your wages are gone. So is your winter credit. I will take the mare, and that burned ridge of yours can freeze with you on it." The stone weighed hard against Franklin's palms. Fire had taken his corrals and most of his stock 18 months earlier. Bishop's credit kept grain in 3 surviving stalls. The borrowed mare was the last animal on his land. The widow did not ask Franklin to sacrifice any of it. She only waited pale beneath the dust, as if she had learned not to count on a man's courage until it cost him something. Franklin waded into the cold mud and set the stone exactly where she had marked. Bishop's mouth flattened. "At noon, 3 days from now, I am bringing 2,000 head through this gap. Anything left in the water will be trampled. Anyone standing in the way will be moved." He turned his horse. "Let the widow drink, boys. It may be her last clean cup." The riders wheeled away. Their laughter drifted after them until the willow leaves swallowed it. Franklin stood ankle-deep in the spring, his wages gone, and his winter suddenly very long. Winnie knelt beside the handcart and reached beneath the wooden bed. From a leather loop, she drew a willow rod cut with narrow notches. Her thumb moved over the lower end. Then she went still. "Someone shaved off 2 marks," she said. Franklin stepped out of the water. "What did they measure?" She looked from the damaged rod to the displaced stones. "Whether Bishop can call this bank abandoned and take the full flow." That answer opened more questions than it closed. Franklin reached for the handcart. "I can push." She pulled it back an inch. "I did not ask you to." He let go at once. "The hill is steep. It pulls left. Then I will push from the right, only on the hill." Her eyes narrowed, weighing him with the same care she had given the stone, only until the ground levels. "Yes, ma'am." They started up the trail. The cart creaked under flour sacks, iron tools, and a row of empty preserving jars. On the steepest rise, Franklin set his shoulder against the right side and took the worst of the weight. The left wheel fought him all the way. "Your cart bears a grudge," he said. "It has met you once," she replied. That was enough time to form an opinion. A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. The sound felt rusty. At the top of the rise, he released the cart exactly where the ground leveled. A weathered cabin stood above the basin, its porch narrow but swept clean. Across the valley, Franklin's blackened ranch showed against the sky. 3 stalls remained under roof. Everything else looked chewed by fire. The widow unlatched her door. "Winnie Foster," she said at last. "Since you have already lost your wages on my account, you may as well know my name." Franklin Larkin. Though Bishop shouted it often enough to spare us the introduction. One corner of her mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but he wanted to earn the rest of it. Inside, preserving jars lined one shelf, willow strips dried over the stove, and a ledger lay open near an unfinished cradle. Franklin stopped at the threshold. "Amos Foster kept Willowglass," he said. "Amos put his name on the agreements." Winnie's voice had no softness in it. "Bishop says a dead man's word holds no water, and a widow's holds no weight." Franklin glanced back toward the spring. Those stones were not a wagon approach. They divided the draws, households at dawn, freight and trading camps at evening, cattle by measured strings when the water stood high enough. She set the damaged rod beside the ledger. "Move the wrong stones and the evening channel dries. Widen Bishop's trench, and he can claim he alone maintained the source." Bishop meant to foul the spring with one mass drive, then sell water from his private wells. Winnie pointed toward the open lean-to behind the cabin. "You may sleep there. I would offer a bed, but lost wages do not buy a place inside my house." Franklin touched his hat. "I prefer the air." He spent the evening trimming the mare's hooves and counting bent nails in a tobacco tin. Ruin had taught him exact numbers. Through the open window, Winnie dipped water from a bucket into 3 jars, checked each depth against the damaged rod, and entered figures in the ledger. At the bottom of the page, she signed A. Foster. Franklin watched the charcoal pause after the first initial. Bishop put his name on land. Perhaps Amos Foster had done the same with water. Before dawn, Franklin saddled the mare. Winnie emerged in a wool coat, the notched rod tucked beneath her arm. "We should see the upper seep," he said. "If Bishop has altered the bank below, he may have worked above it too." "I will ride," she answered. I set the pace. They followed a willow corridor while the sky lightened. Franklin led the mare over roots and held branches aside. Twice the saddle shifted. Twice he waited while Winnie found her own balance. The upper seep lay beneath old cottonwoods. A fresh trench bled water away from the pool and down toward Bishop's range. A shovel rested in the mud, a crooked bee burned into its handle. Winnie dismounted and knelt beside 3 thick roots. She held the damaged rod against them. "Gone," she said. The bark had been hacked smooth where old lines should have crossed it. "The rod was only the key," she told him. "The true depths were cut into these roots. Bishop destroyed both." Franklin studied the diversion. "I can close it with logs and stone." "No." Her answer came sharp enough to stop his first step. "The lower bank is loose. Block this all at once, and the pressure may tear out Willowglass entirely." He looked at his hands. Acting before asking had nearly ruined the spring once already. "Tell me what will hold," he said. Her shoulders eased a fraction. 1 stone in the narrow cut. No timber yet. Let the flow return slowly. Franklin moved 1 stone and no more. Branches stirred behind them. His hand went to his colt before a rider appeared on a paint horse leading 2 pack animals. The man wore a weathered duster and had a dark braid over one shoulder. "Ohiteka," Winnie said. The Comanche horse trader inclined his head. His freight camp had used the evening draw at Willowglass for 11 seasons. He dismounted, examined the cut roots, and looked to Winnie. Bishop has decided shared water is inconvenient. He brings the herd the day after tomorrow, she said. The marks are gone. Oheteka inspected the seep. My wagons arrived tonight. I can speak for our use, but not for who designed the measure. Can you prove the old level? Winnie pressed the rod between both hands. I can rebuild it from the surviving distances. Then I will bring my people as witnesses. He glanced once at Franklin. But she must speak for the spring. She will, Franklin said. Winnie's gaze cut toward him. He corrected himself. I will hear her when she does. Oheteka's mouth twitched. That may be the harder work. He mounted and disappeared among the cottonwoods. Back at the cabin, every loose board called to Franklin's hands. He made himself sit on a stump until Winnie asked for help. Near midday, Winnie came onto the porch with her ledger. Weariness had drawn shadows beneath her eyes, and one hand braced the small of her back. My eyes are tired, she said. Copy these levels for me. Franklin took the charcoal and sat on the step. His figures marched across the fresh page like fence posts set by a drunken crew. Winnie leaned over them. Mr. Larkin, is that a 7? It began as 1. And what did it become? A warning to future readers. Her laugh was quiet, but this time he earned the whole smile. When she shifted and winced, Franklin set a low stool within reach. Her boot pulled it closer. Thank you, she said, and the 2 words warmed him absurdly. When the work was finished, Winnie held out 2 silver coins. For the hill and the copying. Franklin looked at the coins, then at the flower measured so carefully on her shelf. Keep them. Your ranch needs money. 2 coins will not rebuild my ranch. He handed the ledger back. And I will not take them from the woman Bishop means to starve out. Then supper, she said. Not charity, a shared task. You split wood, I feed you. That bargain I can understand. They ate beans and cornbread. Winnie opened a jar marked for winter and pushed the sweeter half of the peaches toward him. You are feeding the hired help too well, he said. You are not hired. You are an expensive mistake who keeps returning. He smiled into his cup. Hoofbeats sounded after dark. Franklin went to the window. A lone rider circled the cabin at the edge of the trees twice, then rode away. Bishop is measuring our nerve, he said. Would you have me inside on the porch or gone? Winnie studied him for a long moment. Surprise passed over her face, followed by something more careful. The porch, she said. Stop anyone who crosses the outer stones. Do not answer for my work. Understood. Franklin spread his blanket across the porch and set his gun belt beside the wall. At midnight, he brought wood when Winnie opened the door with an empty box, then returned to his watch. Later, a flour sack scraped across the floor. He glanced through the open doorway and saw her struggling to reach the jars behind it. Mrs. Foster. She looked up breathless and irritated. Would you have lifting or an idea? Her expression almost accused him of mockery. Then the strain left it. Lifting. He carried the sack where she pointed and returned to the porch. An hour later, the cabin grew still. Through the thin wall came a low lullaby. Winnie sang only 3 lines, stopped, and began again when the child shifted beneath her heart. Franklin faced the dark road. The song gave shape to a want he had not admitted: lamplight, crooked figures in a ledger, and a woman who would never let him mistake help for ownership. He did not turn toward the window. A few minutes later, Winnie moved the oil lamp closer to the glass. Its glow reached across the porch and rested beside him, At dawn, a notice waited on the outer post. Leave before noon, or the mare is seized for debt. Winnie tore it down. Her gaze traveled to the lone animal in Franklin's scorched corral across the basin. "He means to make your loss my answer," she said. "Then do not give him the answer he bought." Her fingers tightened on the paper. "We need the gauge finished today." At the spring, Winnie rebuilt the measure from surviving roots, old stone seats, and figures from the last drought. Franklin held the cord where she directed. Each recovered number restored part of what Bishop had tried to erase. While she carved a trial mark, Winnie hummed the lullaby from the night before. She stopped after the second line. Without thinking, Franklin supplied the third. The knife slipped from her hand and landed in the mud. Her exposed look made him wish he could call the sound back. He offered a clean rag. "I heard only enough to know the child is loved," he said. Winnie wiped the blade. Her hands trembled. "I designed Willowglass," she said. The 3 draws, the safe depth, the overflow channel, every mark on those roots. Franklin remained still. Amos signed the agreement because Bishop and the homesteaders would not accept a measure drawn by a 26-year-old wife. Her voice hardened. He said his name would protect the work. Perhaps it did. It also buried mine. The initials returned to him. Winnie's hand guarding work that had never carried her name. "Then the new gauge should," he said. She held out the knife. "My hand will not steady. Make the final notch." Franklin accepted the handle but did not lower the blade. "I will hold against the shake. The mark is yours." For a moment, anger flashed in her eyes. Then she understood. She set her hand over his. Together they guided the knife, but Winnie made the cut. The new notch appeared clean and dark in the willow. "The child is Amos's," she said after a while. "I will raise it here. I am not seeking another man to put in his place." Franklin crouched beside her, the cord damp between his fingers. "I have no wish to take a dead man's chair. I am trying to become a man you need not watch every minute." Her gaze held his. The space between them was no longer closed. Hooves struck the upper trail before either could speak again. Bishop came early. 10 riders crested the ridge. Behind Bishop's roan, tied by a lead rope, came Franklin's mare. The cattleman stopped at the outer stones. "Larkin, your wages are in my pocket. Your credit can still be restored. Step away while my men reopen the trench. The widow packs her cart and your mare goes home with you." Winnie looked at the mare, then at the burned ridge. Her face went white. "I can leave before dark," she said under her breath. "I will not be the cause of your ranch dying." One step aside would give Franklin Grain a horse and one more winter. It would leave Winnie hauling her crooked cart from the only work that bore the shape of her mind. "Do you want to leave?" he asked her. "Or have you only learned that disappearing makes cruel men quiet?" Her eyes filled, but her answer came clear. "I want the spring. I want my work. I want my child born where no man's permission decides whether we may drink." Franklin turned toward the riders. "Do you want them on the marked bank?" "No." He stepped across the shovels with his hands empty. "No one crosses without her leave," he said. Bishop's smile vanished. "Move him." 3 men dismounted. One drove Franklin into the mud. Another caught his left shoulder with a boot. Franklin could have drawn and given Bishop the violence he wanted. He planted himself again. The men reached for the shovels. Winnie moved faster. She seized the iron pry bar from her cart and crossed to a narrow side cut hidden beneath willow brush. Instead of striking at the packed bank, she worked the flat end into a seam beneath an exposed root and jammed a stone beneath the bar for leverage. Her first shove did nothing. The iron stuck fast. She set her shoulder against it and leaned one boot sliding in the mud. Franklin heard the root groan. Winnie shifted the fulcrum an inch, bore down again, and the packed lip cracked with a sound like a green branch breaking. Water burst through the weakened seam. It tore across the loose trench. Bishop's men had opened, dropped the bank beneath their boots, and spread into a shallow sheet that left the main spring clear. The riders stumbled back, cursing. Ohiteka appeared on the ridge with 12 people from his camp and 2 homesteaders. Bishop looked from the witnesses to Winnie standing in the rushing water with the pry bar against her shoulder. "Tomorrow at noon the herd comes. Let us see your scratches stop 2,000 thirsty cattle." He jerked the mare's lead rope and rode away. Franklin rose, mud running from his sleeves. The mare and his credit were gone, along with the lie that decency alone kept him there. Winnie came to him. Her hands hovered near his bruised shoulder, uncertain. "You chose the spring," she said. "I chose where you asked me to stand." Her mouth tightened. "That answer is becoming troublesome. It has met you more than once now. Perhaps it is entitled to an opinion." A breath of laughter broke through her fear. The next morning, Franklin woke to find Winnie brushing mud from his coat. She pressed careful fingers around his bruised shoulder. "Nothing broken," she said. "You will be slow. I have nowhere to run." Winnie drew 3 channels in the yard dust. "The old rails are behind the shed. We need a narrow cattle lane, a household draw, and a protected approach for Ohiteka's camp. Temporary work. The permanent station will take weeks." She looked up at him. "Do you know a horse ranch rebuilder who can follow a plan without improving it to death?" Franklin studied the lines. "I know one. He is bruised, unemployed, and learning obedience at a dangerous rate." "Then fetch him." Ohiteka's people brought rawhide line and dragged out the old rails. The homesteaders added wagon tongues and cut posts. The rough lanes only had to show the drovers a better choice. Winnie marked every depth. Franklin drove each post where she pointed. Once habit made him shift a rail half a foot to square the line. She tapped the dust with her boot. He moved it back without argument. "You are improving," she said. "Do not spread the news. I have a reputation among stubborn objects." By late morning, the rough station stood ready with the willow gauge fixed where every rider could see it. The earth began to tremble. A brown cloud rose over the northern ridge. Beneath it came the low rolling thunder of cattle. Winnie went to the porch and returned with Franklin's cleaned coat folded over her arm. She did not give it to him yet. "When this is finished," he said, watching the dust advance, "you may have no use for me." It was the nearest he had come to saying the truth. Labor was easier to offer than longing. Winnie reached into her pocket and placed 3 empty preserving jars in his hands. "These must be filled at dawn," she said. "Every morning." Franklin closed his fingers around the glass. "Is that employment?" "No. Employment would require figures I could read." The rumble became a roar. Bishop's herd poured down the slope through dust, 10 riders pushing the lead cattle toward Willowglass. Ohiteka's camp lined one bank and the homesteaders the other. Bishop rode to the front. "Drive them through." The lead steers broke toward the narrow approach. Franklin saw Winnie standing high on the handcart, too exposed with 2,000 frightened animals pressing behind the first rank. For one sick instant, he saw the cart overturned and her body vanish beneath horns and hooves. His hand closed around the colt. A shot might stop one steer and panic the rest into an avalanche. Cold fear moved through him as he forced his fingers loose. He looked to Winnie. "Where?" "Beside the second rail," she said. "Not in front of me." Franklin took his place. "Hold the herd." Winnie's voice carried over the bawling cattle. The lead drover pulled up more from surprise than obedience. Winnie raised the notched gauge. Willowglass can water every animal here, but not in one rush. 20 head to a string. Let each string clear before the next enters. Crowd the pool and you will churn mud before half the herd drinks. Bishop laughed. A widow's scratches do not command my outfit. Winnie lowered the rod into the spring and lifted it again. Water shone at the safe line. She pointed to the side channel already running clear. The measure has held through 2 droughts. Test 1 string. If the level fails, say so before every witness here. Oiteka rode forward. My people will turn the cattle from the far side. The measure is sound. The lead drover studied the pool, too experienced to sacrifice good water for another man's pride. 21st, he called to his flankers. Bishop wheeled on him. I gave an order. And I have 2,000 head to keep alive, the drover answered. I will not foul the only clear spring south of the ridge. He whistled. The flankers peeled off 20 cattle and guided them between the rails. They drank. The waterline dipped, steadied, and returned as the first string moved out. A murmur passed through the gathered riders. The second string entered, then the third. Bishop's authority left him 1 string at a time. He could threaten people in darkness. He could not order thirsty men to ruin water that plainly worked. He spurred his roan toward the ridge. No one followed except 2 riders still tied to his pay. Winnie climbed down from the cart. Her knees nearly gave beneath her, and Franklin's body moved before thought. He caught her elbow, then loosened his grip the instant she found her feet. She looked at his hand, then at him. Keep it there, she said. He did. In front of both camps, Winnie unfolded his coat and settled it over his shoulders. Franklin Larkin stands here because I asked him to, she said. He owns no part of Willowglass. He has a place beside it. She had not rewarded him with her work. She had made room beside it. Franklin looked at the 3 jars in his hand. I am not standing here for wages, Winnie. Then why are you standing here? For the child, the spring, and you if you will have me. The cattle moved behind them in measured strings. No one spoke. Winnie took 1 jar from his hand and held it between both of hers. Help me build the permanent station, she said. Only if you want the man as well as the hands. I want the man, she answered. The hands will require supervision. Relief broke through him so sharply that he laughed. Winnie did too, tears bright on her dusty face. Then she slid her free hand into his. The herd watered in measured strings until sunset. Oiteka's people took the evening draw, and the homesteaders carried news of the station down every trail. Bishop still owned wells and cattle, but not the story told about Willowglass. Franklin helped Winnie unload the handcart after the last string cleared. When he lifted the left crossbar, something rattled inside the wood. He set it down. This rail is hollow. Winnie frowned. Amos replaced it before he died. It has pulled left ever since. Franklin turned the loose wooden plug with his thumb and stopped. It is your cart. You open it? She drew the plug free. A brass tube slid into her palm. Inside lay a statement bearing a town notary's seal. Written a month before Amos died, it named Winnie as designer and rightful keeper of the Willowglass measure. For a long time she said nothing. Franklin did not read over her shoulder. He knew, she whispered at last. Too late, but he knew what he had done. She folded the paper. It could strengthen her claim, but it had not saved the spring. She had done that with her own voice. Will you put it in the ledger? Franklin asked. Winnie shook her head. In my record box, not under his name. She carried it inside and returned with a fresh ledger. On the first page she wrote W. Foster in firm charcoal letters. Then she handed the charcoal to Franklin. Write today's date. He made a figure so crooked that she stared at it in dismay. The spring survived Bishop, she said. It may not survive your penmanship. Then you had better keep me close. Her smile answered before her words did. That is the present arrangement. 6 months later, Willowglass Station stood solid against the thaw. 3 troughs served measured cattle strings, a covered household draw kept the water clean, and Ohiteka's camp used the evening approach. Bishop challenged the arrangement once. Amos's statement and the witnesses ended the matter before a hearing. The paper confirmed what Winnie's public stand had already made hers. Franklin rebuilt 2 stalls by repairing wagons and training remounts. He bought back the mare from a trader, and Winnie claimed the animal still preferred the spring to him. He said the mare had poor judgment. Winnie reminded him she had met him more than once. Inside the cabin, a newborn slept in the finished cradle. Franklin had shaped the rockers only after Winnie drew the curve and approved the first cut. At dawn, he carried 3 empty jars down to the spring. Winnie stood at the central post with a heavy shawl over her shoulders, recording the morning depth under her own name. Franklin filled the jars and placed them beside her ledger. Then he drew a new bone-handled notch knife from his coat. "The water is high," he said. "It is." He opened his palm, offering her the knife. "Last year the measure carried only your mark. I am asking whether you want mine beside it for the coming year. Not on your work, beside your life." Winnie looked at the blade, then placed her hand over his. Together, they carved 1 clean notch into the post. The baby cried from the cabin. Franklin glanced toward the sound. "That is your dawn employment," Winnie said. "My figures are improving. The child cannot read. You are safe for now." He laughed, and she stepped into his arms. "You once told 10 men to leave me alone," she whispered. Franklin lowered his forehead to hers. "I remember. I am asking 1 man not to." He held her while water moved through the 3 channels and morning touched the ridge. Love was not standing in a woman's place. It was hearing where she asked him to stand and staying